Eu tenho a honra de convidar para subir aqui ao palco a Anna Serner, que foi diretora do Instituto de Cinema da Suécia por 10 anos e, como o embaixador já nos contou aqui, desenvolveu um trabalho fundamental na busca pela equidade no audiovisual. Bem-vinda, Ana.
Sorry.
So you will start for a presentation, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So go ahead.
I just want to start off saying how happy I am and condolences about your father. But thank you for the inspirational talk. And I think this is very São Paulo for me to be able to meet your life, because this is a fantastic city and all the people that is really giving from their hearts all the time. So I'm so happy that you have invited me. Okay. And now I'm going to take you through the Swedish way of doing things, or at least the Anna way of doing things. And I'm happy to take all questions. But I will, yes. As the CEO of the Swedish Film Institute, the biggest assignment you have, and I guess that goes for all of you in production companies, you want to reach quality in films, because that means that you reach the audience, and that is the most important thing. But what I found out is, I have to look because I forgot, so I will do a little bit of this. When, I'm a lawyer from the beginning, and I came to the Swedish Film Institute, and when I was proposed to fund films, which I was the one signing off to, I never really understood why. So the people came to me and said, Anna, we need to put €1 million or €1.5 million or dollars into this movie. And I asked, but why? And they always said, like, I feel it in the stomach. This is an amazing movie. Or it made me laugh or cry. And for me, it was very hard to understand why that would be something that other people would know. So what I was doing then was to make this a little bit more objective, instead of the subjective going to your stomach, because that is very unconscious biased. So I told my people in my organization that I need you to explain to me why you want to put all this taxpayers' money into a film. And I made a think tank, so I put the industry with me, and we were going through for half a year maybe, or maybe a little bit less, but for quite a while, what is really good film about? And we ended up with these 3 criteria. So it's relevance, which is not relevant in terms of it has to be political or it has to be something, but it has to be something that is contemporary and make people think and feel. So when it's relevant, it could be an emotion of a father's death, or a class matter, or environmental matter, or love. All feelings are legitimate, but they need to be contemporary. So there are actually things that we used to make films about that nowadays feel very old. And we don't want that. We also want some part of it to be original or new. It hasn't got to be very experimental and artistically never seen before. But we don't want to see the same film over and over again. So what I asked my staff was to say, in what sense is this relevant to put taxpayers' money into it today? Explain for me. And in what sense is this new? Is it artistically breaking boundaries? Or is it just the combination of a cinematographer with a story? Or it could be very small things that makes the story about love or death feel new and make you feel again. And then also, of course, we went through the budget and we went through the people in the team to make sure that the taxpayers' money went to a film that we believed would reach an audience, not being spent in wrong ways or being, in a team that argues and don't reach the goal they have. So this was met in my organization with quite a lot of skeptical faces, because people in the creative industry, they are not used to having to explain. Because in the creative industry, we all know what is good. He is very good. Yeah, but the Dardenne brothers, or, it's always a man who is the genius, and then it's always good. So making people having to actually argue made them raise a little bit above what they are usually been doing and actually start to open up their eyes. So I also said, what do we want to reach? How do we see in the end what is quality? So we made this success chart. Or like the German head of the Film Institute said, so this is the Swedish Red Cross, this is how many critic awards you get in Sweden when you get the critique in the papers. You get from 1 to 5. And we make an average. So we have 15 media's critics, and we make an average of what you reach. This is the admissions in the cinemas, and we all know that now that is not as important because people see films in so many different ways. But we also know, is there anyone from Netflix or anything here that wants to reveal the numbers so we could start actually see the impact? But it's really a way of trying to see what kind of impact a film has, because the more people that goes to see it and pay money, the more, of course, you could believe that it has some kind of relevance or originality, and the craft is good enough. So I made my people to say, because we funded in the potential of being a film. As you all know, we've been talking yesterday about with Erika and Tatiana, who is trying to funding a film, that you have to explain your film so many years before you are fully financed. So we really want the people that funds to know what kind of movie do you expect this to be? What is the potential? So I asked them, do you believe it's an A film or a B film? And there is no valuation between the A and the B. The C and the D. If you go to a funder and say, the potential is there is the critics will hate it and the audience won't see it, that is no film to fund. Nor is a film that is in the D corner, where, okay, the audience sees it, but the critics hates it, so the critics will always speak badly about it, which means that the next Swedish film and the next will have a harder time because the trademark or the brand of the Swedish film will be too bad. The very commercial industry don't like that you don't only measure on the tickets or the money, but for a public-funded institute that has also the assignment of making sure that the Swedish film brand is great internationally, we can't afford to have films that only some people earn some money on. We want the Swedish brand to own some money as well. But to be in the A corner, no people in the cinemas, but a great festival life, is probably one of the films that break boundaries in the artistic world. Because the festivals are the ones that picks out the originality in films. So if you haven't seen it before, then you are very successful in the festivals. And I can tell you, because I've been following the Swedish women directors, and they've had so many great successes in the international areas. And I think a lot of it is because what you said about the perspectives and the female gaze. It's a hard word to use, but it's really the way you portray life. And the more diversity you have behind the camera, the more diverse you will see on the screen, wherever the screen is. So for me, a film that has no people in the cinemas, will not make any money, is really worth the cultural money that the Swedish Film Institute could offer. But of course, ending up in the B corner, where you both have an international success and getting a big audience to the cinemas, is great. And you may know that Sweden won the Palme d'Or in Cannes this year. And that film has now been released in most parts of the world, and it just reached 500,000 admissions in France, and it just reached 200,000 in Sweden, and it's over 1 million worldwide, but it hasn't even been premiered yet. Of course, that film it gets festival awards. I forgot to say that. It's the Critic Awards and points for international festivals, A Festival and the different sections in the A festivals. So if you are admitted in competition in Cannes, you get 2 points. If you are in the Certain Regard, you get 1 point. So Triangle of Sadness will end up in the B corner, and that is, of course, a very admirable corner. So I said to my people, we have an assignment to make the absolute highest quality, and I believe the only way to do that, we will start using criterias. We will start taking every individual into consideration, no matter race or gender or any other matter. Because if we don't take into consideration the whole talent base, we will never reach the highest quality. So that was when I realized we have to start to make a change. Because at that time, well, Felicia will really know this, because in Sweden everyone looked at Denmark and said, what do they do? Because they're always winning everything and they're always there. And in Sweden, they only complained, because we are, sorry to say it, we are a bit whiny people. But that's what I also say, stop whining, start changing. And what do you do when you do change? It's not really hard, it's just hard to implement. But to understand how to do change is very easy, and it goes for everything. I just want to see how long I've been talking. I don't know. No, okay, you will stop me. Yeah. So I said, okay, how do you do change? You start off doing a SWOT, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And that is starting off understanding, where are you right now? Are you whining or are you happy? If you're happy, you don't need to change. But in Sweden, we were really unhappy when I started in 2011. My first Cannes experience was horrible, because all the reporters came to me and said, so why is Denmark here in Cannes? Why is Sweden never here? Why didn't we ever win a Palme d'Or? So I realized we need to change. And when you do the change, you start off understanding we have a problem. And then you say, where do we want to be? What is the goal? What is the target? And when you have started off with the target or the vision, but I really want to measure as well. Visions is sometimes corporate bullshit, and we don't want the corporate bullshit here. We want to make the real change. So we have a target, and then you say, how long time do you need to reach the target? And I said in 2011, I give it to 2014. I actually said 16, but it ended up being 14. But I said, let's measure over time. Because saying we can have equality each year when we make so few decisions a year, we fund 15 long feature films every year. It's not possible to be 50-50 every year. So I said, let's have it over time and measure it 4-year terms. I released this in 2012, and I said in 2016, I want to reach the target. And I had a strategy, and I will go through with it. And you need a strategy, you need how to reach the target, and then you need to have an action plan, which is really the action plan. Because actions will mean that you have to re-budget, or you have to fund with budgets in another way. So you need some kind of money to make change. It will not happen without budget. But then you will just have to start to act and stop talking, because there are so many words, and that doesn't make any change. So I said, we're in a crappy place. We want to end up 50-50 over time for all women, white, black, any sexual orientation. This should be an inclusive, all women 50-50. And then the strategy was really to meet every argument why there weren't any women directors. I have picked out the women directors, and in feature films actually, but it goes for short documentaries, everything. But the more money, the less women. So if you pick out the hardest part, you can be sure that the rest will follow. So there are always, and that means any area in the society, there are arguments for why don't we have women. So I said, for every argument, let's have one action. And the action is really, of course you want to change something with the action, but just having an action will make change, because people will start talking about it, and then you get, the next circle and the next circle. So what I usually say is, don't be so afraid of choosing an action, because if you chose an action that wasn't so successful, change action. But sitting without doing an action, that will not make any change. So I picked out these 5 arguments, and there aren't any good women enough. And then the next, which is mostly for the commercial, the big budget films, very, very, very few women get to do big budget films, in Sweden as well. And the argument is usually, no, women don't want to. They are not interested in money. They are not business-wise. And then when you ask, why don't you have women directors? They say, women don't want to. No, they want to be at home with their families. They don't want to be directors. And a very strong argument is, we have to be aware of the quality. If we do quotas or if we make change, we may lose quality. And then remember that they were whining about the lack of quality in Swedish film, but it's still very much quality. And then the last point is what I call the anecdotal experience. I have tried once. I met someone that has, and we want it to be on a higher level, academic level. So we need to make sure that we get the proper numbers and not a personal view of what they believe. And it's a lot of personal feelings within the equality area. So what did we do? In the first, I think I actually have to stand up. This is much better. Sorry. I hope that is okay for you. The first one, there aren't any good women enough. And we just heard about the female director. I mean, in the beginning, in the world, the first feature film directors were all women. Alice Guy Blaché, you may know. I mean, she's a fantastic French director who was totally erased out of history. Women are erased out of history. So what we did was to dig out all women in key positions, director, script writers, producer, editor, cinematographer, in all time. In film world, you know, we started in 1895, so it's not like in literature. We actually took it from the literature world. And we made the site NordicWomenInFilm.com because I wanted my Nordic neighbors to join us. That was a way of pushing. They are now pacing up, but they were a little bit behind at that time, sorry to say. But to name it the Nordic was to make a bigger impact. The women aren't commercial enough. Then we needed really to do special actions just to make sure that we made a movement. So we made a mentorship course for women directors doing bigger budgets, not in terms of how to direct, but in terms of how to get your film fully financed, how to get your idea from idea to the audience. Because there are women that actually have done that. And I had to go to Denmark again because Katrine Wimfeldt was one of the directors who sadly passed away very early.
My very good friend.
Oh, yeah, she was amazing. But there are some women that have actually made a strategic way. They found a way around it, and I wanted their knowledge to be spread. And the answer to the question, women say no, they don't want to, it is actually true. Women say no much more often than men, but there are reasons why. There are double punishments. We are being considered bad mothers because we don't pick our kids up or we have babysitters. This is Sweden at least. And then we go to the job and we are being considered bad at the job because we wanted to go back home because we didn't want to be bad mothers. And so there are so many reasons why women have to consider, is it worth paying the price? And if you know that, you could actually build systems to support them to make it the effort worth it. But then you really need to go out and ask and understand the real reasons, the real barriers for the women. And I will just give you one example because we made a study out in the pre-film schools where the researcher asked both young men and young women about what they wanted to do. They were in the film schools. So she asked the young women, and she went all over Sweden, what do you want to do when you're finished with school? And she said, I want to be a director. And what happened was that she was met from the world with, are you sure? A director? You understand the challenge? It's such a competition, and you will have to give up your family for weeks, months, work during weekends. Are you sure it's worth the price you will have to pay? And when they asked the young men, what do you want to do after school? And he said, I want to become a director. He was met with, are you sure you understand how hard it is? What a competition. But you go. What do you have to lose? I'll help you. So it turned out that the expectations for young women to see a future as a director were so low that they skipped out of their careers, even though they were fully trained to do other things because they just couldn't see it happen. And that is very important to understand, because if you make it possible by explaining how the business will take care of your dilemmas, then you could keep the women. So we lose quality. And my answer to that is, you should count everything, all decisions, to be able to both be proactive instead of reactive, and also to measure. So what we did in Sweden is that we make decisions every month, and I think that goes for all the Nordic countries, that every month you make the decisions of who to fund, both short documentaries and long. So in January, we didn't put a number to a person, but we just kept the numbers and aggregated the numbers. So if we end up in April, everyone's decision, and we are 20 people around the table, it's a distributor, and it's the production funder, and it's the controller. And when we went through the quality criteria, and everything was decided, and we revealed the numbers, if we still in April could see too few women, then my question was to the people, so what do you do about that? And then people start to be proactive. So they say, well, yeah, we have to go out to the production companies and talk and make them find quality in new ways. Or let's launch a script scheme for women for just bigger budgets. So you have to do affirmative actions in small terms. Not only, we didn't do quotas. We only did affirmative actions. And we count and count and count. But if you count once a year, which is always doing it afterwards, and you have to count, and all the departments, they count, and then you make the brochure, and you have to have everything is supposed to be very strict, and you reveal the numbers in March, maybe April, and you say, oh, that's bad. Last year we didn't do it either. They're already halfway into the next year. So if you keep on doing it, you will stay in being reactive instead of proactive. And to get away from my experience is to really bring out more knowledge, and proper knowledge, not personal anecdotes or feelings. So what we did was that every year we presented an annual report in the equality area. It was the last one was to measure how long time it takes for a woman to get a fully financed film, and to understand where are the barriers during the way in an overview of 5 to 10 years. Another was a quality interview report of women of color. How is it to be a woman of color, and how does that differ from white women? We also had it with women of age, because we are very ageistic in Sweden. So this is the Nordic women in film. I will now rush a little bit because I think I've been speaking very long. No. These are the statistics. So how did it go? When the money said, we want women, the industry reaction was, let's find the women. But if you go to say, we want women, but never on the expense of quality, the industry will say, we do as we always did. So you can see 2000 to 2005, there was a woman in charge at the Swedish Film Institute, and she was very gender equal. But she always said, but. 2006 to 2012, it was a woman as well. She was also very much into gender equality, and she did a lot of actions, which has really helped my work, because it takes time to build the bigger talent pool. But she also said, but. In 2012, I said, I want to reach 50-50. I think 40-60, the 60-40 was a good one, because I think 40-60 is actually bullshit. Because it's always women being the 40 and men being the 60. But 50-50 gives you 10 plus minus 10%. That is fine for me. But you don't say it like 40-60 or even 60-40 actually. But 50-50 It's okay to differ, of course, a little bit, but it's around that number. And I said, I hope the industry will help us, because if they don't, I'm not afraid of quotas. And I think that little threat was the key to the very rapid movement, because already I started off in 2011, and we had 29% women that year. And in 2012, we had 39%. And in 2014, we were up to 50%. But over the period, we ended up with 49%. And the period after that, 2017 to 2020, we were 43. I think that is fine. In the brackets, it's the totally commercial films where there are no regulatory or public money with aim for reaching all their citizens, because we all pay tax, right? So we should be able to benefit from the tax money as well. So you can see if there are no regulations from the authorities, it's really nothing happens. It has happened a little bit now since Me Too movement. And when we released our new target in 2016, because when I started office in 2012, there was very little interest in the world for this. And I remember in Cannes, I was inviting all the reporters in Cannes. And we also had a big party because we turned 50, the Swedish Film Institute, in 2013. And we rented a big beach, and we were giving a lot of drinks. And I was releasing my action plan. And the reporters looked at me, and they went strictly to the bar. And I was talking to no one and saying 50-50 is very important. And then in 2016 already, something happened. And I realized it already when I was in Toronto, 2015, when I was doing a speech like this, and I could see that it was a fully crowded room. And, you know, we were a lot of people coming up on the stage, and everyone got applause. And I was, you know, the last one coming up on stage, and I suddenly felt like a rock star. And it was like, what happened here? And then I went to the street in Cannes, and someone came up to me and said, Anna, can I take a selfie with you? And I was like, do you want to take a selfie with me? You know, all these stars? Yes, but do you know who I am? Yes, of course, you're Anna Serner. And I was like, how does she know this? It turned out that, if you remember, 2015, in the Oscars, Cate Blanchett went up on stage and receiving an Oscar for some part, I don't know what part it was, and she started talking about how it is being a woman in Hollywood. And she was followed by Emma Watson, Patricia Arquette, Meryl Streep, and when the stars start talking on the red carpet, things happen. So every reporter were like, what is this? Is it anything happen anywhere in the world? And then I think people said, because I always had contact with the grassroots, and so I think they said, yes, there is an Anna Serner in the Nordic countries. Ask her. And I think it actually was that made it come through. So in 2016, we had to take a new era. We passed the first 4 years, and we're going into the next period. And we were like thinking what to do. And then I had my Minister of Culture, a black woman who was very much into this, an amazing woman. And she said, I want to make a seminar in Cannes. And I remembered how it was being in Cannes. So I was a little bit nervous. You know, ministers, they want a lot of attention. So we tried to fool the audience that it looked crowded while it wasn't. But she went to the Minister of France and said, you should be with me on stage. And in France, culture is very important. And this woman said, yes, I will come. And then, you know, Le Monde and everything, they were covering it. So when we had this, we named it 50-50 by 2020. And that was the start of the movement of the 50-50 by 2020. And we were covered in all the world's newspapers. Yes, it was really amazing, because Suddenly the movement had started. And then we all know about the Me Too movement that, of course, emphasized. And I'm so happy today that in our party in 2013, my people were really upset because the guards had stopped one of the guests. And who was that? Harvey Weinstein. He didn't enter our party. And everyone was, nowadays I'm really happy that he wasn't one of. So this is the numbers of our funders. So what happened actually with the effects? No. So the effects, if we go back to the presentation, so we have the national awards and international awards. The national award in our case is Guldbaggen. That's the Oscar award in Sweden. And during the years of 2010, talking about my predecessors' good work in action plans, because they also had so, up to last year, this year it's not finalized yet, it has been awarded to 52% of the women. And it's in direction, producer, and script. And one year it's 100% women, another year 100% men. That is how it should be when the quality is running. But when you aggregate, you can see that women are as good as men. No doubt about that. And when you see it on the international arena, during the past 5 years, we have had 52% of all our admissions were women. And it's, this year in Cannes, and there were 42% women, 52 films in 5 years. We are a country with inhabitants less than you have people in São Paulo. So it says a lot about the spread. And almost every other were a woman, even though the festival market is still a very male market, white, male, gay market, actually. And this is the year in Cannes. We consider Ali Abbasi, who was in Cannes as well, with Holy Spider, because he's Swedish, but he's very much Danish as well, so we can share him. But Tarek Saleh, who is an Egyptian, born in Sweden, though, and he's very Swedish. So we have a non-white male director, a white male director, and we got the prize for the new talent of the year, Ninja Thyberg, a white woman. So I think this really shows when you work with inclusion and when you work with quality, it's not that we abandon the men, because they are doing really great films when they are doing great films, but the mediocre men that got the money before, they are not very happy with me, but they were never in Cannes, and they never won the prizes. So this is what we want to show the world. This is Swedish brand nowadays. And we got the Palme d'Or. Ruben Östlund got the Palme d'Or for the second time. There are only 10 directors in the world ever that have received that. So that is all due to their talent. I'm very proud that I've been part of changing a structure that leads to a higher quality for everyone. And I think that is all I can say, that I'm happy. I quit my job because I also think that management should be changed every once in a while, because too much power is no good. So after 10 years, I said, let's make someone else keep on the work and find new perspectives, because, of course, there are more things to be done. But I'm very happy I can be here and share this with you anyways. Thank you.
Thank you a lot. It was great to hear to you. And in the beginning, you were talking about how to reach quality. And here in Brazil, after this 4 years of no politics, and we'll have to face this new politic for audiovisual and this point of quality and why to make a film must be faced. So it was quite interesting to listen to this. And coming to our subject, I'll try to speak in English, you know. And
your English is great.
And we are talking about gender equality, diversity, and inclusion. And from 2011 to 2022, and these terms become more and more complex, I feel. And when we talk about diversity, we talk also about race. And when we talk about gender, we don't talk anymore only about female and male, so things become more complex. And do you believe this agenda of 50-50 should be... of course, it was a big thing, but it should somehow be updated to...
I think we tried to do the update with saying 50-50 all women. Anyone who considers themselves as women. Because we have structures that are discriminating for women, and then there are the intersectional part of race and sexuality and everything. But if you don't consider yourself a woman, then you are facing other kinds of discrimination. But we have to be able to focus also on a part that actually concerns 50% of the population without feeling embarrassed that it may have people that don't feel included. I really want everyone to feel included in the human rights, but of course, gender discrimination is a part of the human rights. But I think that it's a very relevant part. And I think we have to be able to talk about different things at the same time. So I hope that everyone feels that this is for the better good, and the more we reach human rights in bigger areas, it will also be included in other areas. But we are so many women in the world of all kinds of ages, races, functionalities, sexualities, and I think we are worth having a focus on that issue.
Interesting. Perguntas da plateia? No?
É só uma pergunta técnica. Eu não entendi a porcentagem que estava entre parênteses ao lado dos números. O que significava? Ao que se referia?
So I had the numbers. Yeah, so it was directors.
Sim.
With public funding, and in brackets, no public funding. And then script writers, the same, and then producers. So we were counting those three areas. Is that the answer to your question?
Okay.
Yeah. So I think it's very important to understand, of course, it's not only directors. It is very important with the script writers and the producers.
Oi, bom dia. Desculpa. Primeiramente, gostaria de agradecer, né, pela fala extraordinária. E gostaria de perguntar como foi na Suécia o impacto da pandemia nas políticas públicas de inserção das mulheres no audiovisual. Como no Brasil a gente viveu um sucateamento, né, da cultura durante a pandemia, tanto pelo governo federal quanto, enfim, vários fatores que dificultaram muito, né, com que o fomento à cultura, né, continuasse como era nos anos anteriores. E eu gostaria de saber como que a pandemia afetou todo esse progresso, né, enfim, que você apresentou para a gente. E, enfim, eu gostaria de saber o seu relato.
I think the Swedish government was very understanding about the cultural. But of course, you can never be reimbursed with all costs and lack of income. So what we did from the beginning was that we got a lot of money and we made sure that the established production companies that could make sure that we had an industry left after the years were intact. But it took me a while, and then I felt that this is always the problem for women, that when the money goes down, which it does from time to time, it always is the women that has to pay. So what I did, and I actually got the industry with me, was to earmark quite a lot of money for the next generation. And we made that money being spread out in the whole country with the regional communities to find the new voices. And the new voices, I mean also any race, countries, because we have a lot of refugees and women. And then I went together with the Dutch from Netherlands, CEO, and we made an international European funding for the new voices, which is aimed only to discriminated voices. So it's called the New Dawn, and I think Denmark is trying to get in but has problems of political reasons. I actually didn't ask my Minister of Culture. I did it anyways. Sometimes you shouldn't ask, you should just do. But there are 10 countries, and as you have been colonized by Portugal, you could actually argue that the Portuguese money also should reach out to the Brazilian country. I know that has been an issue in the Netherlands from Indonesia, where they were very big as a colonial power. So it's 10 countries. Canada is with us, so it's mostly European, but it's also Canadian. And it was all public funding, so we were happy. We had a better government then. Now we have a new one.
Obrigada.
Hi, Anna. I have a question. That one of the points that you said it's the prior of the quality that you evaluate is the festivals, and mainly the A-type festivals. I don't know how it's in Sweden, but here in Brazil we have a problem that when you go to A-type festivals, they are like a small group who is also dominated by men. And here in Brazil, you have to have like big produce companies have like networking to do and to present their directors and their films to these type of festivals, while small companies, who are the companies who hire women and diversity more, has less money and didn't have the time to create this networking. So how do you guys solve this problem to look to this as a qualitative point without exclude people who did not have the process to be able to be in these festivals yet?
I wish I could say that we did solve the problem, but we didn't. But for me, I am very pragmatic. I realize that you need to get the attention of success first, and then you can spread and spread and spread. But if we have had chosen all festivals, there would be no credibility. But no one can argue that, yeah, Palme d'Or, that is nothing. And I wanted it to be acknowledged by the media and by all the producers. I really faced, suddenly people were saying in Sweden, the mediocre ones, said, yeah, but who cares about Cannes? And we want to reach the audience. But that is not credible to say. So what we did was that when we funded Swedish festivals, we could make sure that those festivals that are not A-listed, of course, because we have only one, it's not maybe even A-listed, but we could make sure that they exist. And when we support productions or films to travel, we could still give them money to travel to important networkings and important platforms, even though it wasn't A-listed festivals. So we tried to balance it, but no, it of course is exclusive. You need to understand that. But then I started to have a cooperation with, which was founded in France, Collectif 50/50. I was invited to a festival in the French Alps, and they were putting me together with some people, and we said that you should make a group here in France. So they made the Collectif 50/50 that made the festival pledge. And the festival pledge was announced in 2018, the year after Me Too. And for the first time, the manager in Cannes had to step up on stage and say, yeah, okay, we will have to reveal our numbers and we will aim for 50/50 in the jury. And they started and they had Kate Blanchett as a jury chair. And it's very interesting because that pledge also spread around the world. And now when you think about who won in Oscars, in Venice, in France, it's women. And it's the Chinese in Oscars, and in France it was a black woman. I mean, it's amazing that it really, when you have new jury members that are more aware, then they start finding new quality. And so I think I'm so happy about that.
Hi there, my name is Susanna here. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about Brazilian movies abroad. As we are talking about festivals, we have a very important film production here in Brazil. Quality is amazing, but we do have some difficulties in showing our films abroad, even if through these years we are presenting more and more in international festivals. So I wonder how, if you can talk about how you see Brazilian movies in international festivals and how we are presenting ourselves, because we do have a great quality, and it would be great to see Brazil being presented more and more. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, because I think it's what I reflect of my journey is that, and it's of course obvious, that if you being talked about, people start having interest. Where the attention goes, energy flows. So when I was maybe a bitch going out saying 50/50 and everyone should follow, blah, 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 they had the attention. And suddenly they started looking at Swedish films, I think, with new interest. So here something's happening. And I think for Brazilian matters, you don't have that brand. You have had amazing films that also made it in the world, but to have an amazing film doesn't do all the work. But if Brazilian film industry would go out and say, we want to break with the history like Denmark did with the Dogma, then you have the attention. And then suddenly the festivals will start, okay, do we have a Brazilian movie here? And they will start looking into the films. So I think that is very important when you dare make a profile. But you have to understand every time you do that, you choose to say no to things. Every strategy is choosing away from something and choosing to something else. And that makes people very angry. So you will have to be, you will have to have your group of people supporting you. But if you go together, if you find here an interesting concept that could be, I mean, the gender equality in Brazil, or the racial problem, or the indigenous problem, or whatever it is, I mean, you could really make very much difference, because you're one of the biggest countries, and you're an amazing country. You're worth being screened, and your stories are worth being screened outside, I think. So, yeah, please do.
Thank you very much, Anna, for your very inspirational talk. It's amazing to see how much impact you can make with very simple messages, and how with a movement that can, you know, through social media and through the leadership of actresses and women in the industry, you can make noise. I'd like to ask your opinion or your insight on how you would advise, from my understanding, the film body that you directed for so long, the Swedish Film Institute, is a collective represented by professionals in the industry. Presumably you are not government regimented. You are an independent body that occasionally receives, presumably, government support. Am I right in assuming that?
In Sweden and all the European countries, the institutes, the film foundations or film institutes, are governmental bodies with governmental money. Sweden, for a long time, up till 2017, had 50% public money, 50% business money. But we went from that into a totally governmental funding. So we are, and that is, of course, problems with this as well. But so we are the taxpayers' body for the industry to apply to. So we never go out and say, we want now a film about a problem, or anyone can make a film about this. We will have the money. So we never demand or ask for films. It's really very, very important that the industry is independent and that we only consider what we believe is quality. And I think that is what we try to do.
I only ask for clarification reasons because I reflect on our reality here in Brazil, having just emerged from what we can only describe an authoritarian government, democratically elected, so we must remember that, but where the industries for support, the mechanisms for support, of which my father was a creator. He created the incentive law for culture 30 years ago, which then inspired the creation of various audiovisual mechanisms that also work on the back of tax rebate. So you can, as an industry, as a company, write off 4% of your owed tax, and it's not that you cease to pay that tax, that 4% gets instead reverted into a cultural product, be it, a film festival, or in the case of the audiovisual law, a film product. And what we've witnessed, and where I hope, our foundation, our Institute Ruane Foundation, can make a contribution, is we saw a systematic dismantlement of mechanisms that should have been safeguarded by the government and have been safeguarded for the last, since we have, a free democratic country since 1984. We had 20 years of military dictatorship where we were state-controlled. There were censorship mechanisms in place, and yet we had a thriving film industry despite that. But then now, in the last 4 years, systematically, not just the film industry, but museums, they've been suffering because the incentive mechanisms that were supposed to be safeguarded in order to, like in Sweden, keep neutrality, bring in the market, and just create the mechanism, that has just been dismantled. So can you comment on what could be a solution? Because if you're working from the understanding and the premise that you have, independent of whether it's a left-wing or a slightly more conservative or right-of-center government, culture will be safeguarded. That is a given. I live in the UK, and in the UK, whether it's a conservative government or a Labour government, it doesn't come into question that culture and the film industry must be safeguarded. And whether it's a hybrid, where the private industry and the public bodies work together, that's the ideal. But the challenge is we lost that balance, and suddenly we have a civil industry and organizations like Instituto Moreira Salles and Cultura, who have been crucial, trying to save the industry because government has been absent, and in many cases working against us. So in your opinion, what could be, you're speaking here about public policy, is there a scenario in which maybe you can preempt an authoritarian situation where civil society can survive in an effective way through collectives or through means that don't depend on government funding, but yet can keep the industry alive? Hopefully we won't be in a situation like this again, but I'd be curious to know.
Well, $1 million question, and if I could answer that, I would be the president of the world, and I would love to. Of course, democracies are very fragile, and in Sweden we have a turn of power since a month, and we are afraid now because you cut down the finances, and we can see the other Nordic countries where they have had this before, where you have cut downs in 20-25%, and that means that the industry will not survive. But what can we do? And I think that is, for all of us, so important to do the work of inclusion, to make sure that the next generation and the new voices are integrated into the industry that is now established. And I think that it's really important for the cultural industry maybe to step up from me, myself, and I, which is unfortunately very common, and of course, because you want to do your film. But if you could organize, and I say that in Sweden as well, organize, go out, make sure that you are not separate. So, I mean, when we talk about 50-50, is that good or bad when there are some few that is not feeling included? We have to dare to organize and to be clear, because if we are too separated, it's too individual, then we lose the power of the voice. And I think that is so important now that we have a clear voice that is inclusive. And to have that conversation within an industry. Also, I mean, I love that there are at least a couple of men here, because you are, of course, as important, and the movement of inclusion is not against anyone. It's pro something. And if we could join of the threat of the threat for democracy, to have guidelines in what can I do to include somebody else, and how can I say the same thing as someone that looks like we were opponents, but that we are actually joining. And I think that power is very important, especially in the audiovisual industry, where it's so easy, technically, to bring out stories and make sure that the freedom of speech and the freedom of the artistic world and the perspectives of being human is really spread. So we need that conversation, but we need to organize and stop being so selfish.
Muito bem, acho que que essa fala final veio no tempo certo, que a gente estava chegando ao fim do nosso debate, e acho que a gente termina com esse pensamento também muito inspirador dessa sua fala final. Obrigada mais uma vez, foi incrível ouvi-la. Obrigada a todo mundo também. Tem mais uma pergunta?
Tem.
Então tá bom. E depois nós encerramos.
Eu vou aproveitar que ela está com o tradutor. Eu fico muito feliz de ouvir você falando sobre políticas públicas e como essas políticas públicas foram implementadas na Suécia. E para a gente é muito gratificante, principalmente que pessoas que atuam no setor através de entidades defendendo o setor audiovisual. Mas o que me chamou a atenção particularmente foi a questão das pesquisas, né? Porque você traz essas metas que você estipula, essas metas de que vamos promover igualdade, e você promove a pesquisa para provar que essas pessoas não estão inseridas. Eu falo isso para você porque, durante esses 4 anos que a gente teve atuando e brigando por direitos no setor audiovisual, o que a gente via era muito essa situação de que como é que a gente comprova que a política funciona e como é que a gente justifica que mais investimentos devem ser feitos, né? E aqui no Brasil a gente não tem o hábito de fazer pesquisa. A gente até tenta, mas são poucas as pesquisas, são escassas. E é muito bom você trazer esses dados, porque também serve para a gente usar de exemplo aqui, né? Então, assim, eu queria que você falasse só um pouquinho como é que você conseguiu implementar esse sistema de fazer essa avaliação de dados recorrente, né? Porque você conseguiu analisar vários períodos e como isso tinha surtido efeito, inclusive. Então, eu queria que você falasse um pouco desse processo de implementação das pesquisas para justificar a política pública.
I thank you for asking that question, because I forgot to be very clear in the importance of counting, because that is one of the most important tools we have, because it's so easy to track and follow. So it is really, if you start to count, you will reveal your problems. And I've met that a lot in Europe with countries that didn't count. And they said to me, "We don't have a problem, Anna." And I said, "I believe you. When you go home and count and come back to me and show me the numbers, I tell you, I can promise you have a problem." And they all have. So the countries that don't want to count have something to hide. I think that it's still very dangerous for a lot of different institutions to do the counting. So we had a lot of work to be made in Europe to persuade the European Observatory in the EU to start counting the numbers of the countries. So we had, and we had the other question, how does this work with A-festivals? And are you inclusive? Nothing is perfect from the beginning, but you have to start somewhere. So I accept to start off lower than I would want to. So if they say, we can't count everything, I say, what can you count? So let's start with that. And then make people join that. And when they are not threatened, they will start adding on, because it's interesting to count. Research is interesting, and we have academics in all countries. So it's more of the problem when you start it off, who should be the collective part, collecting part, and who should pay it. And we have the institution, we are the public funded institution, and I think that goes for many of the institutions in Europe, but a lot of the countries haven't counted, not even in Europe. But you could also, we have in Europe, we have NGO started by women, EWA, European Women of Audiovisual Sector, and they started to count themselves. And they were, of course, needing sponsor money. And I, from the Swedish Film Institute, I made a way of funding them, even though if I've asked, I wouldn't have been able to. But if you don't ask, so many things you can do in good ways. But then they got support from more and more, and then they started to have the database. But it's very hard. You need the funding. But I think if there is anything you should start joining around, it is actually counting, because it's so hard to deny the numbers.
Acho que é isso. Obrigada mais uma vez.